Jason called me the next day and said, "You've asked for our picture." You guys were one of them. I was like, man, I wish I could. And this is when the law isn't the way. I mean, unfortunately, I can't buy them from you. You're not a wholesale dealer. Otherwise, I'd figure out a way to do something.
If everyone will take a seat, we're going to get this thing started here in about 60 seconds. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started. Regular meeting of the Destin City Council, May 7th, 2018, at 6 p.m. And we'll start this meeting with the invocation by Reverend James Calderazzo from Safe Harbor Presbyterian Church.
You would please pray with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we give you all the praise, all the glory, all the honor. All that we have and all that we are comes from you. Help us as we gather this night to do that which is right in your sight and will benefit and bless the city of Destin. Forgive us our own self-centeredness and selfishness that oftentimes keeps us from truly loving you and one another. Father, we also thank you this is the week of blessings in our community. We ask your grace may be poured out upon us in abundance in this week and in the year ahead. Be present with us as we bless the marketplace of Destin Wednesday. May be honored as we bless the fleet this Thursday. And in all this, help us to acknowledge our great need for you. Truly apart from you and your Son, we can do nothing true and lasting work. Please be with this meeting tonight. May your spirit of holiness and peace be present from beginning to end. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item tonight is agenda approval. Do I have any? Oh, I do have someone. Ms. Ramswell.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and pull item 7B from consent, please.
I'll second that, Mayor, if we need it.
Okay, we got a second. Any discussion on that particular item? Okay, so we'll pull that. Where would you like to address that at? Just okay, we'll do that. Staff, any comments?
Yes, sir. A question for the City Council with respect to the executive session for BI Inc. versus City of Destin. We are scheduled to have an executive session tonight. We have pretty recently received some new information, so I would ask the City Council, we can proceed tonight. We have the counsel for the insurance company for the city here, or we could continue to the next City Council meeting on May 21st, which would be a time and date certain at 6 p.m. to give staff a chance to review some new information that was submitted.
Are you waiting for direction?
Yes. If we want to proceed with executive session tonight, we can, but I'm just letting you all know that there's some new information that staff would like to review. So if you're okay with continuing it to the 21st at 6 p.m., we would go ahead and do that, but I will defer to the council.
Is that because you feel like we would be trying to make a decision without all the information we'd need tonight for a decision?
Yes.
But we could discuss this during executive, correct?
Yes.
You have options tonight. You could have an executive session tonight and then also continue it and to the next meeting too, if you want.
That's correct.
I personally, I'd like to go ahead and go through with it and see what's going on, and we can
Okay.
always schedule another one.
That's fine.
So what's your recommendation is we go ahead and do it, and we may not make a decision tonight just based on our executive decision because we
Sure,
don't have
yeah.
all the information?
Absolutely, just play it by ear depending upon what happens tonight in executive.
Right, and just so the council know that there is information that staff would be providing that the council had asked for. That information is now incomplete. So you would be looking at information that may not be completely.
And I'm just going to make a suggestion. If it sounds like we need to get some more information, so in the interest of time, instead of doing it twice, we can all do it at one time, I think is what they're getting at. So I don't have a problem with putting it off till the 21st. You'll be the mayor pro tem at that meeting. So that's up to the council. We'll let the council decide whether they'd like to.
Motion or?
Yeah, we would need a motion. I'll entertain a motion to put off the executive meeting till the 21st and continue to date certain.
And just to clarify, that would be at 6 p.m. We also need a certain time.
At 6 p.m.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I'd kind of like just to hear what's happening and what's going on, so at least we can have a status update, if nothing else.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and vote on this motion with the second. Let's just go ahead and do that.
Mayor, I'll have to abstain.
Roger.
I'm a relative of one of the litigants.
Ayes have it, so we'll go ahead and we'll have the executive meeting May 21st at 6 p.m.
Okay, so just for the record, I'm just going to state the name of the case just for our city records. BI Inc. Dewey Destin Harborside LLC plaintiff versus City of Destin, Florida, in the Circuit Court of the First Judicial Circuit in and for Okaloosa County, Florida, case number 2016 CA-003672F, executive session to discuss settlement negotiations and costs will be on May 21st at 6 p.m.
Thank you very much. My curiosity is the same as yours, Mr. Amwell. You kind of want to hear it, but at the same time, I just don't, let's just do it one time. All right, so we removed, which one was that?
B.
7B, and do we want to go ahead, we have a motion for that? Oh, you motion, and Rodney
Sure,
second.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda with the exception of pulling item 7B from the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Let's go ahead and vote. Let me, there we go. Unanimous, ayes have it, so moved. All right, next on the agenda, approval of minutes. We do these one at a time? Okay. 1A, approval of minutes of February 20th, 2018, regular city council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Let me press. Ayes have it, so moved. Approval of minutes, item 1B, February 5th, 2018, regular city council meeting.
Motion
Move to approve. Or
Wait.
second, whichever's appropriate.
We have a motion and a second. Unanimous, ayes have it, so moved. Item 1C, approval of minutes of January 22nd, 2018, special city council meeting.
Motion to approve?
Yep. We have a motion, we have a second. Ayes have it, so moved. Ray, do you you got the proclamation ready? Is anybody going to receive this proclamation? Ah, awesome. All right. I have a proclamation for Building Safety Month. We want to recognize the critical role code officials play in developing and applying building standards to ensure the safety of our citizens. I'd like to ask the city building official, Ms. Noel, to come forward and receive this proclamation. Do my whereas. Whereas the city of Destin is committed to recognizing our growth and strength depends on the safety and economic value of the homes, buildings, and infrastructure that serve our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster. And whereas vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, and others in the construction industry work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. These dedicated members of the International Code Council create and implement the highest quality code to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, worship, and play. And whereas the International Codes, the most widely adopted building safety and fire prevention codes in the nation, are used by most U.S. cities, counties, and states. These modern building safety codes also include safeguards to protect the public from natural disasters, such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, and earthquakes. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our communities, largely unknown guardians of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us of safe, efficient, and livable buildings that are essential to keep America great. And whereas building code saves lives, the theme for Building Safety Month 2018 encourages all Americans to raise awareness of the importance of building safe and resilient construction, fire prevention, disaster mitigation, and new technologies in the construction industry. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Gary Jarvis, on behalf of the Destin City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 as Building Safety Month. Accordingly, I encourage our citizens to join their communities in participation in Building Safety Month activities. So done this 7th day of May 2018. I'm here.
So yes, every year for the past 38 years, May has been acknowledged as Building Safety Month. Each week of May, beginning last week, there were several categories highlighting different sections. Week 1, which was last week, 1 through 4, partners with code officials to build stronger, safer communities. And that's important to protect the citizens from disasters like fire, weather, and related events, and structural collapse. And we encourage people who have a proposed project to come and speak with the building division so we can help them with the permit and inspection process in order to protect the home building owner and its occupants. Week 2 is the 6th to the 12th, advancing resilient communities through science and technology, such as energy, water-saving devices, materials, and education on the usage of those items. Week 3 is 13 through 19, protecting communities from disaster. This is achieved by building structures to the latest code, which includes building to our local wind load design criteria of 140 to 150 miles per hour. We are in a hurricane zone. So. Week 4 is 20 through 26, safeguarding our water. Water supply is crucial to our community, as we know, as our surrounding bodies of water for which our community thrives, and making this a very important category to everyone. Week 5, 27 to 31, improving education and training standards for a safer tomorrow. With powerful advancements of new methods for solving age-old problems, the building industry, like many industries, is consistently changing. For building safety professionals worldwide, education and training are valuable and essential aspects of professional development. Thank you all so much.
I'm the guy that didn't turn his phone down. Blue cards, okay, thank you. All right, number 3 on the agenda is public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings. All other agenda items other than those under number 6. We've got a couple blue cards of folks that want to talk, and we'll just call these 2 folks up, and then we'll open it to the general public for anyone else that wants to speak. Up first will be Kevin Brown.
How y'all doing? I just want to thank y'all for your time here. I am one of the business owners out of Crab Island, and I just wanted to present y'all with all our documentation. A lot of the news media has been told that we don't have licenses, we're not paying sales tax, what have you. I've got every documentation for anybody that's in the Crab Island Business Association, all the restaurants out there, so I just kind of want to put that to rest. So can I present this to y'all?
Kevin, we'll make sure that staff prepares copies for everyone.
I have a question.
Review.
Who is the license through? Is it through Gulf Islands National Seashore?
Not currently. It's through the state of Florida in Okaloosa County. The Seashore is not requiring one at this point. I met with Dan Brown a couple weeks ago, and he said not until next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll follow up, Carice, with making sure everybody gets copies of these. Next on the list to speak is Samuel Popple, Crab Island Business Association.
How you guys doing? All right, well, yeah, I'm here to basically let everyone know that we did start the Crab Island Business Association this year. The Crab Island Business Association is dedicated to unifying the surrounding businesses, the business on Crab Island and the surrounding businesses, giving small business owners a place at the table as we look to develop long-term strategies for this national treasure. Within that unity, we also aim to create one brand operating standard under which the association will adhere, thus attracting the best visitors and residents, providing the best outcome for all, for everybody out on Crab Island. The Crab Island Business Association is also a strong local business community that employs over 100 local residents for seasonal work. Let's see. And basically, our goal is, with the right mix of businesses and attractions, we can develop a long-term strategy to continue operating on Crab Island and keeping it as a treasure that everyone wants to continue to come and see and visit Destin for.
Would anyone like to ask for any questions? Because I have one. You formed your association, and one of the things you talked about is establishing standards. What kind of standards are you guys entertaining or thinking about doing?
Well, we want to address some of the safety concerns that we've heard about. So, we want to be a steward with the city and the county to try to do our best to eliminate some of those concerns. Also, maybe some of the aesthetics, and have a standard of how some of the businesses look. Because I know in past years, one of the things I've heard a couple years back that it's floating trailer park, and I think most of those businesses are gone now, and the standard of the appearance of most of the businesses has been raised. But overall, we want to promote a family-friendly environment. We don't want Crab Island to have the name of a wild party destination. The wild party doesn't support business. That's all good times. But what helps business is the family crowd. It's the families that come to Destin and spend the money, and those are what we want out on Crab Island as well, as families.
I have a question. Where can we find out some more information about what you guys are doing and what you'd like to see? Do you have a website or something?
No, we're very recently formed, but we would love to sit down and meet with any of the council members and stuff. I'll leave some cards so you guys can contact me directly. Kevin Brown, he just spoke. He's also a member of the association. But yeah, we'd love to be able to sit down and work together. Because obviously we don't want to go out of business. so that's we want to try to work together to come up with a good compromise that can appeal to everybody.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. One last question. Mm-hmm. Now, we had a Crab Island workshop before I became mayor. Most of the council members, except for Skip, attended that, I think. What has been done since that workshop to today? Because I know you've read the paper, I read the paper, we get phone calls, and we know what the Okaloosa County Commissioners are asking us to produce a resolution. So what has happened between then and now? And you talked about maybe trying to meet with some of your association members.
Right.
I don't know if another workshop would be in order, or we're past that point. Could you answer that?
In terms of what we've done, so we've formed the association. We've been meeting with several of the county commissioners. Actually, after today, we've met with all of them as the association. We're developing plans to have for each of our barges that stay there. We want first aid. There'll be first aid stations and designated points where we do first aid training with a lot of our staff members and stuff. And so that way, each of our barges can be a point of where people in need can go if they, we had in years past where done informally, where people, cut themselves on their own boat prop or different things of water, and they come over and we've offered help, but we want to put more actual signage up to have people come to us. We're also wanting to have our things, because a lot of times, people get separated on Crab Island, so have meeting places for lost family, that and stuff, so that way, they can reunite, on one of our barges. And so we're also looking, like I said, any other suggestions of things that you guys would like us to look into doing. We would be love to hear it and see if we can implement it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have one question.
Hold on.
Do y'all, in that list of packets, and I haven't seen any of the licenses, but are there 2 COPs or 4 COPs in there, that state of Florida alcohol licenses?
No, there are not any.
Do any businesses out there carry any alcohol licenses?
No, they do not issue liquor licenses for barges on the water.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just checking.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I see a paper that you wrote on ethics recently. Is that you or your father? Talking about Crab Island and the different things going on Crab Island, Chomp and Chill.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, those are the only 2 blue cards I got, people that wanted to officially sign up to speak. Do we have any other members of the audience that like to address the council? Come on up, sir. Just state your name, where you, and your address.
Name is Emery Perkins, 748 Benning Drive. I operate the ice cream boats on Crab Island. You ask about safety. All my boats have prop guards on them, completely enclosed cages all the way around. I'm insured through the state, with the state as a carrier, and carry all the license that the parks require. So they issued me one this year, and then they said that they were just going to operate under last year's, so they rescinded the one that they issued me and told me that I'd be okay, just continue on the way that I was working. So.
And what permit was that? It was a business license from the city?
It was from the parks, the golf. And you talk about safety. Over the last 3 years, I probably, and my daughter, I'm not a great speaker, so my voice is breaking. We probably saved, with the sheriffs, can back it up, probably 25, 30 people from drowning. Where we're always mobile, moving around. We get them at the last second, pull them up. We work hand in hand with the sheriffs. We call them up when we see a problem. When people are up to no good on the island, we let them know. So just want to let you know. All my boats completely enclosed cage and very family friendly. So.
Thank you, Emery. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak?
Thank you for letting me speak. Tim O'Malley. I own the Treasure Chest Water Park. My wife Katie and I do. And we were out there getting set up today, just as an example, and just getting set up and noticed 3 swimmers in trouble offshore had been swept off the bar. And I sent one of the guys that worked with me out there with rescue devices and brought him back in, 3 of them back in. One had a life preserver, but the other 2 were trying to get to him. So we try to help the people in every way. We see a squall coming, we try to get them anchored up safely, you know, because we get these summer squalls in the summer. They come out of nowhere and they're fast, and these people don't realize it. You know, those winds come up violent. And so we try to help everyone out there we can. And I'm with Sam and them, you know, anything that we can do to appease the people and do our part, we're here. We're willing.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Anyone else like to speak on any other item other than the public hearing items coming up? Seeing none. Close the public comment on agenda items that are not on public hearings. Next is item 4, City Manager Report, and we'll go 4A to start with. You have the floor, or microphone.
Yes, sir. So this was brought forward on April 16th. The City Council directed the land use attorney to craft a resolution to present to the county that would speak to the issue of unregulated commercial activity and the mooring of floating structures related to Crab Island. If you have any specific questions regarding the resolution, I would defer that to Ms. Kopp, the land use attorney.
We have Mr. Braden. Would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make the recommended motion. I move that the City Council adopt Resolution 18-14 and direct the City Clerk to forward Resolution 18-14 to the Okaloosa County Board of Commissioners immediately upon adoption.
We have a motion, and do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
We have a second for discussion. Skip, would you like to be the first one to step up to the plate?
Okay, so the way I see this thing, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion about this, and even before I was on the city council, I went to the workshop that we had and listened to kind of both sides, but mostly listened to what the folks that had the businesses out there on Crab Island talked about. And I've seen now tonight what they've talked about and what they've done since then. And what I'll tell you is, I mean, I know that a lot of people have described that out there as kind of, the pendulum has kind of swung this way, and it was kind of the wild, wild west out there. And it's out of control. And I understand that. And now, we're kind of trying to make a resolution that says we're going to swing the pendulum all the way the other way. We're going to do away with all the businesses out there on Crab Island, and we're going to do away with everything, all the activities out there. And what I would tell you is that, from my perspective anyway, I think we ought to kind of try to bring it back somewhere into the center of this and have a little bit of a reason here. What I see going on out there at Crab Island is, to me, that's free enterprise. And to me, free enterprise is kind of the foundation of America. The way free enterprise works is the public creates a need, and free enterprise then brings the entrepreneurs, the business people, the business men and women, to fulfill that need and to meet that need. And if there wasn't a need out there, these businesses wouldn't be out there. And if there wasn't a need out there, the people wouldn't be utilizing their businesses, and these people would be out of business. So there wouldn't be any need for us to do this. So, you know, I mean, I'm involved with the American Legion, and I know how we work down there, and I know what that's a land-based business, but I've got a bar down there. We sell liquor, and the state comes in and they inspect me, and they see how I'm serving it, and they'll even send people in there that are underage and see if I'm going to serve them. And if I do, they're going to shut me down. I've got a restaurant where we serve meals, and they come in there, the health inspector comes in and he'll inspect me periodically, and they see if my temperatures are right in my refrigerators, they see if all my food is stored properly, if we're serving it correctly, if we're cleaning up after it, if we're keeping down on the rodents and pests and all that. And if I don't meet all those codes, then they shut me down. And I've got a ballroom there where we have anniversaries, and we have birthdays, and we have bands in there, and people are celebrating. And sometimes we leave the doors and windows open and it gets a little loud, and the neighbors complain, and they call the sheriff, and the sheriff comes over and tells us to tone it down. And if we don't, then they shut us down. So we've got all these things that are controlling all these businesses, all this enterprise on land, and the same thing just needs to apply to the folks on Crab Island. I would really rather see, if we require them to operate just like they would on land, then we're going to provide for the health and the safety and the security of our residents and of our tourists and our visitors. And that's what I think we're here to do. And so I would recommend that we kind of try to find, like I said, this kind of middle ground and send something to the county and ask the county to institute whatever regulations or ordinances or rules or laws that they have to control what goes on out there on Crab Island, just like they control all the businesses here on land. And I'll shut up.
That was very well thought out, well spoken. Rodney, do you have anything you'd like to say? I had you on the list. That was before.
I just made the motion, Mayor.
I'll make a comment. I met with this group before I got elected, and one of the things they were talking to me about was, you know, what can we do? They already knew that there was just some people just don't like the optics of it. And I shared with them some of the things that we did in the fishery management world, where we had to find a good place to land in a bad universe. And I made that recommendation to them. And I also made that recommendation that there's some things that you need to do. One is you need to get the facts out and to dispel some of the rumors. But more importantly, you need to organize yourselves and form an association and try to establish some standards that the community could work with or at least tolerate. Otherwise, I told them they were doomed, plain and simple, because we are all duly elected by the public, and the public's been wearing everybody out, saying they don't like what's going on down there. I also made a recommendation that they probably might ought to consider making a commercial zone on Crab Island. I saw yesterday that they didn't listen to me on that one. That's still my recommendation, by the way, Sam, because now everything's haphazard. And in spite of my recommendations, everything's bigger. all your barges and buildings and recreation areas are larger and larger and larger, and I think that's part of the problem. It's the visual more so than maybe the actual practicality of the issues. So that all being said, I'm a free enterprise kind of guy. I'm an entrepreneurial kind of guy, but at the same time, you just can't go willy-nilly and Katie bar the door. And I know you guys are trying to come up with some solutions that will help. Unfortunately, I think that you got some more room to go. And I think this resolution that is before us here, it's not binding. The city of Destin does not have jurisdiction over Crab Island. All we can do is make recommendations to the county commissioners, and that's truly where your fight lies, and you and I both know that. So that being said, I just hope that the council members take into account that they're trying to make improvements, but there's still room to go. And just to remind everyone that if this resolution passes, it's just a resolution to encourage the county. If you think that after listening to these business owners that maybe this resolution ought not to come out of the city of Destin, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Any further discussion on this? Go ahead, Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. So I actually have a question before I delve further. Is the jurisdiction of Crab Island technically belongs to Gulf Island National Seashore, but if you were to take a look and pull out, look at the state, would it go to Okaloosa Island or would it come to the city of Destin? Like, who would be the primary jurisdiction?
That's actually a good question. At that workshop we were at, which actually none of y'all were there because only Jim Foreman and the previous mayor were there. There was a man from the DEP who showed up who was like their guru of who had what. He was the only person in that room out of all the law enforcement agencies, out of all the representatives from various agencies that actually knew exactly who had the title to it. And it varies on where you're at and what distance you're at away from the land. But the easiest answer is the county. Actually, that's county property, but it's within the Gulf Islands National Seashore, kind of like Okaloosa Island that's within the county, but it's actually, it's actually Eglin Air Force Base. And so there's jurisdictions, not just one jurisdiction over the area. There's like so many multiple layers out there at Crab Island that it gets really confusing. Some groups have concurrent jurisdiction, like the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department can go out there if they see a crime being committed. So can the FWC, and the Coast Guard could even probably get involved if it's serious enough. And so not just one agency has jurisdiction. And if you're going to ask who actually owns the dirt there, I think it's the county, I believe. But I can get you the contact information for the man with the DP who knew all the answers to that one particular issue.
I know a few years ago, and this is sort of what I'm getting at, and I think what a lot of our speakers had mentioned, is the fact that in the past we have worked together with multiple entities and the public and the business owners and the vendors. And one of the things that came out of that was the safety corridor that was put in so that the emergency personnel could get through all the boat traffic and attend to people in the event of an emergency. Now, I am not for government overreach or over-regulation, but it has gotten out of hand. With that said, I'd like to see some sort of, maybe we look at a limited number, and it wouldn't even be us, I don't think, that would be issuing these licenses to begin with or to end with, however you would look at it. Because I don't want to put people out of business, and of course I think we all recognize that Crab Island is a tourist destination. It's, I think, what has grown out of what was a fun, family-friendly tourist destination that has a lot of us worried. And I would imagine you guys are out there every day. You've probably also seen some folks that maybe don't have licenses and take business away from you, or maybe some that have gotten out of hand. So I would think you guys would benefit if we're getting some of those bad players, so to speak, away from the good players and the folks that do have the licenses that were given out at one point. Now, from what I understand, Gulf Island is not giving these permits to sell or to vend anymore. I don't know why. That's certainly something to look into. But I'm certainly in favor of us speaking up and saying, we agree there's a problem, what can we do? But I wouldn't be in favor of phasing it out altogether, because I think it's become something that it wasn't a few years ago, and it can still be something terrific with selected vendors that are following the rules. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Chatham?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your argument, Skip. My issue with it is being Gulf Islands National Seashore. Noriega Point is full of tourists, but, the city prevents me from setting up a hot dog stand and selling beer from there, even though I'm sure my sales would be pretty good if I did. But like the mayor said, this is a non-binding resolution. We're simply requesting the county take a look at this. I really do support getting rid of the overnight mooring. I think that, when you hear that it looks like a floating trailer park, I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is these vessels just stay out there constantly, and it integrates our view corridor coming over the bridge. So I'll support this, and I have no way how this will go tonight. I got a feeling I know which way Tuffy would probably vote on this. But I do support it, and the good news for the Crab Island business owners who are not happy to hear that I'm going to support this, but again, that's probably no surprise, is that I do think the county's probably going to be more moderate than I am on this issue. And that's just a hunch, but that's what I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Skip, your last chance.
Okay, I'll just take one more bite at the apple. And I don't mind us going to the county, and it's my understanding that the legislature gave the county jurisdiction out there, and that's why we're going with a resolution to them, so they can come up with some kind of an ordinance or a policy or a law or whatever that's going to control things out there. And that's what I would like for us to recommend to them, rather than what this resolution is saying is we're recommending to them that they pretty much shut the thing down. And that's the only part that I don't agree with. I think we ought to modify this resolution to go to the county that says, okay, county, we want you to look at this and institute the same kind of laws and rules and regulations and ordinances that control the businesses that we run on land, that do the same thing to the folks out there on Crab Island, that's all. That way they're licensed, they're controlled, they're policed, just like we are here on land. But the way this recommendation is, this recommendation to me is just too negative. And we're going to the county and asking them to do something that we really I don't think, want them to do.
Skip, if you'd like to make that in the form of a motion, I would second it.
Okay, I'll make a substitute motion that we ask the county to look at the issues with Crab Island and institute whatever ordinances or laws or rules or regulations to control the business enterprises on Crab Island the same as they would be controlled if they were land-based.
Skip, I'm not going to support this, but I would appreciate it if you'd include something about
and that they are not allowed to be they are not allowed to be moored overnight.
Alcohol. Moored overnight's great, and I fully support that, but I would support some kind of alcohol oversight.
I think probably the way to do it is if you just remove Section 3 and move it forward, we would accomplish most, I think, of what you wanted, and it would remove the section which is supporting the phasing out of complete commercial activity on Crab Island, and we'll see what the county does with our recommendation.
Carice, would you appreciate this, under this particular thing, that we just send this resolution back to you and take another stab at it and change the verbiage versus trying to change it right here at this meeting?
That was going to be my question, sir. If the council is firm on what they want, if it is to remove Section 3 and to change the whereas clauses to reflect the intent with Section 3 taken out, then I can bring that, I can work with the land use attorney, and we can bring that back at the next meeting.
And I think that would allow each one of the council members during their briefing to talk with you individually and try to come up with a better resolution. Is that doable, Jeff?
Well, as long as y'all cut something out, that's actually increasing the rights of the public, so there's really no concerns legally if they want to just cut Section 3 out, but they do want to add things in like the alcohol prohibition, then that would be a reason maybe to bring it back. But if they just want to cut Section 3 out, that could just be crossed out tonight, if that's the only thing they're asking to change.
Well, I don't want to get us spinning our wheels here because we could be back and forth on this a long time. So do you want to clarify your substitute motion?
I could create a substitute motion that just eliminates Section 3, and I would be comfortable with that, but.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor. I think it's important to probably, if we're going to be cutting it, but I think it's important to include the prohibition on the sale of alcohol, which would require it to go back to staff, and then we could vote on a clean resolution at the next meeting.
The only thing, and I don't even know, I don't know the laws about selling alcohol on the water. It sounds like they can't get a license to sell alcohol on the water, so.
No, I think in the packet, my concern with that is, as you look at their public safety calls went from like 74 to 565, and then their drownings went from, not their drownings, but their distressed swimmers went from 50 to so many, 500 too, and you're just adding to the problem, and and they don't have alcohol licenses now, and yet alcohol is coming off of their barges.
I'm going to go ahead and call this to a vote. With your substitute motion, we had a second, and that's to remove item 3, and let's just go ahead and vote that up or down and see where we go.
Sir, do we know exactly what the substitute motion is? Because it kind of more...
Would you restate that, Mr.
Okay, the substitute motion would be to send this to the county and just remove Section 3 from the resolution.
Mr. Bailey, you get that? Okay, so we have a motion, we had a second, we've had plenty of discussion. Let's go ahead and vote.
No.
Nays have it, so that substitute motion is not pass.
Mayor, before we get to it, I'm going to offer a substitute motion that it sends this back to staff. It removes Section 3, the additional whereas clauses, and would include some language regarding the prohibition of alcohol and hopefully encouraging the enforcement of those regulations.
Second.
If you all don't mind, we've discussed it. Let's just go ahead and take a...
Okay,
let's,
then they get it back to staff.
right. Ayes have it. So, Carice, we're bringing it back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let's go move on here. Item 4B.
Okay, so at the April 16th meeting, Mayor Jarvis had talked to the council about a proposed list of revisions to the City Council regular meeting agenda process. Those revisions were provided to council the next day, asked for comments. At the April 16th meeting, the mayor also asked that these changes be brought back at this meeting in the form of a resolution. And in the agenda cover sheet, it is broken out on the changes for item 3, item 4, item 7, item 8, and item 9. So these are being brought forward to create efficiencies, to streamline the meeting process, afford shorter meetings, make it more attractive for citizens to attend, and allow for greater public participation and the resolution of concerns through an efficient public process. And if the council has any questions or wishes staff to elaborate on any of these changes, I'll be happy to do so.
I just have one question. Are we going to have time limits like we have now? Because usually at the end of the meeting where the public can comment on anything, we've really not done a time limit on the matter.
Yeah, my whole process was there's time limits on the public discussion at the beginning of the meeting. That way they could talk not only on what's on the agenda, but things that aren't on the agenda. So the time limit will remain. It's lots of times people have to wait to the very end of the meeting for public comment, and it really hinders people that have young children, got to get ready for school, or they got business meetings early in the day. It's the whole purpose behind that. And the design behind that is we'll have two cards. We'll have a blue card for items that are on the agenda and a yellow card for items that are not. Lots of times the items on the yellow card are just people have issues that they haven't brought to the council members individually, or they haven't talked to the city manager. It's basically they've got concerns. And the good thing about the yellow card is they can come up there and we have record of what they spoke on, and it gives the city manager opportunity to follow through with that individual citizen and try to resolve the issue instead of the council having to do it. And if not, then we're made aware of it and we can bring it up at a later time. And it's just, in that way, everyone can get their opportunity to participate in the public process in a timely manner. And the people that have, that want to stay for the reading of ordinances and stuff like that, well, then they can stay because they have other business that they want to do with the council. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the efforts to be more efficient, and I agree with you. There are certainly some nights that we're sitting here till 10, 11, 11:30, almost midnight, when all of us have pretty much lost attention and track of time and what on earth is happening at that point. However, I do have a few concerns. Looking at the revised number 3, where it's talking about reducing speakers from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. One of my concerns with that is the way it's worded, and I'm not sure if it was your intention or not, but it sounds as if there are opportunities for you to readjust the allotted time and allow for some topics people to speak longer, and depending on where in the meeting it is, for them to be adjusted. I would like to see everybody, regardless of topic and whether it's a yellow card or a blue card, everybody kind of have the same amount of time. Obviously, our council meetings are public meetings, the purpose being we want the public to be involved, we want the public to speak and interact with us and pose questions. So in addition to that, my other concern is not having a public comment at the end of the meeting. And my thinking on that is that specifically when you look at consent agenda, which they would actually already see, but when you get to the comments and presentations from mayor and council and the attorneys, often we will bring things up and discuss things that perhaps the public doesn't know is out there, or it just pings something that somebody feels the need to say. So I would really hate to remove that opportunity for the public to follow up on something that they felt was really important. So those are my primary concerns. I'm not sure if anyone else on council feels the same, but welcome to hear y'all's thoughts as well.
Well, we have two more speakers that want to speak. Seeing how I brought this change of the procedures up, I'll defend the thought process there. In all public speaking experiences in state and local and national level, most times it's 3 minutes, and it's a human issue. Is the reason why most government entities do 3 minutes, because usually, especially on an issue important to someone, beyond 3 minutes they just begin to repeat themselves. When you know you only have 3 minutes, it also puts you in a position where you prepare your statement and make it concise and clear. And there's folks here that aren't good public speakers, so sometimes it's better that they just read off notes anyways. We experience that in the fishery management process all the time. We have young captains that have never spoke in front of anyone, but they know they've got 3 minutes, they know they got something that they want to say, and so they prepare themselves, and it's really interesting how articulate and clear and concise it is, because they're not just up there rambling around. So you'll find out in my thought process behind this is not only is that an actual endeavor of humanity, but more importantly, if you've got 15 minutes, I'd rather hear from 5 people than 3 on an issue that's important to the council and to the city. And most cases like tonight, we didn't have that many public comments, but on some of the hot button issues, where you might have 25 speakers, that at 5 minutes versus 3 minutes, you're talking about hours. And I've been in hours of public hearings. So that's the mindset behind it. Not only that, but with the 3 minutes, any council member, when that person comes up, can ask that person a question to give them more time to clarify their thoughts. And as chairman, when we have that 3-minute time limit, I got that latitude and that ability to allow 2 or 3 council persons to ask that person because maybe their comments are not clear, and to address the issues at the end. Some of the things that we talk about, because we're under time constraints, we don't get the public involved. If we do everything in a timely manner and we have a discussion, even in an ordinance or something like that, that gives me as chairman latitude to allow people to address. Maybe someone may raise their hand and say, well, I'd like to make a comment about what you guys are talking up here. I just think by being more efficient, it allows us more flexibility in how we interact and engage with our community.
Sure, I appreciate that. I guess my concern is I don't feel like we should operate under a time constraint, and I don't care how eloquent someone is and how prepared they are. If they've got something that they really feel and then they want us to hear, I don't care how they say it. I want to hear it. So, and I'm not checking my watch to make sure I'm out of here at a certain time. I want to be able to hear everyone and discuss everything, to the extent we need to discuss it to reach some clarity. So that's just my follow-up. And I do completely see what you're saying and your points. But
all right, next, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. My thoughts on it is, when I was elected, I work at the will of the people. And I don't care if I got to sit here till 9 or 10 o'clock at night to listen to them and do my job. I'm all about, efficient myself. I don't think we need to sit here till 11, 12 o'clock at night, but, it's not all about start the meeting at 6 and then see how, fast we can get the hell out the door and get on home so we can, go hunting or fishing in the morning. I don't think that's it either. I'm real tired of getting phone calls, especially after the last meeting we had. It just seems like the council is, more interested in fishing. They're more interested in cobia season. We can't have any workshops or meetings or anything, because it's cobia season, or it's king mackerel season or whatever. Well, if that's the case, then maybe you should just step down and, not be on the council and go mackerel fishing or whatever you need to do. Looking at this looks like, it wants to put time restraints on the public. It wants to put time restraints on the council, to get in my time, tell me what I can talk about, when I can talk about it. It's not all, it seems like since this new election, it's all it's been about. Let's just see how fast we can get out of here. And I'm tired of getting phone calls and emails about it, because that's what they're complaining about. You care less about us, and our agendas are getting shorter. There's not, near as many items on them. And over my 4-year term, that's just a lot of work that's not getting done. That's a lot of things that the 13,000 people that I'm representing is just not getting done. Instead of, 10 items on the agenda tonight, we got 6 or 5, whatever it is. That's just a lot of stuff that's not been getting done. And our items are getting shorter. It's not because there's not things that need to be done, it's just because they're not being put on there.
Thank you, Mr. Braden.
I'm not through, Mayor. Thank you. I just wish that we could, you know, yeah, it needs to be, you know, a more timely manner. You know, we don't want to waste a whole lot of time, but then again, you know, just trying to rush through things and shut people up and just try to get in and out, it looks bad, and it doesn't look, you know, that's the phone calls and emails I'm getting, is people complaining that that's the way it looks like in their eyes as well. I just don't want to get in that habit, you know. I don't want people thinking that I'm trying to rush and trying to get through this as fast as possible and not give you time to have an input as public. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Well, apparently you're missing the total motivation, intent, and spirit behind this resolution and procedures, ordinance and procedures, Mr. Braden. This is geared towards allowing the citizens to participate in the meeting. You may not care if you sit here till 11 o'clock, but those people out there most likely, in most cases, with their families and businesses, do. And I have no problem with the public having plenty of time to speak, and that's the whole gist behind running efficient meetings, is to allow more people to participate in the process and not have to stay here till 10 or 11 o'clock, because there is a lot of things on the order. There's plenty of room in this, and most of the changes are not that dramatic, that allows this council to do their business. Being efficient is good for the public. Being efficient is good for good governance. Good governance doesn't take place at 10 o'clock at night when you've been here since 6 o'clock, most of the time. So that's the motivation and intent behind there. It's not to hurry up and get out of here. There's nobody here, everybody up here cares about this community, they wouldn't be here. This is about running an efficient meeting and letting the public participate in this process and hopefully do it in an effective way, in a good way for this business. That's the intent behind it. It's not to see how fast we get out the door. It's see how fast or how much the public could participate in this process, how good that information, that participation makes us better legislatures in this process. That's the intent behind it. I'm sorry that you feel the way you do, but you know, these procedures, the intent and the spirit behind this is for them, not so much for us. Mr. Marler.
The basic thing that I see is that we have the perception, some people have the perception in the audience, from the citizens, the community, and some council members. We are legislative, not administrative. A lot of times what happens is these citizens come up here, which I like the idea of the yellow card and blue card. They come up here thinking we can make a decision for them right then, right there. And 9 times out of 10, we can't. That needs to go through the proper process of administration, which is why we have a city manager and a city, the city staff. They're not here to just collect their paychecks. They're here to implement what we decide as a legislative body. So therefore, once we start educating the public a little more, and I've stated this a lot of times, people will come up to me and complain about something we did, and I said, well, were you at the meeting? No, I watched it on TV, or I saw it on YouTube. If you're not here at the meeting to participate, and I think that's part of what the mayor's intent is that the public needs to come and participate more. Everyone that's in this audience tonight had a reason to be here for something that's already on the agenda, or something they want to ask us to put on the next agenda, which still has to come through us to go to the city manager. And or the city manager can put stuff out herself to us stating that there's a complaint about this or that. I have to agree with the mayor on the point, by the end of the evening, especially if we've sit here over 2 or 3 hours on one subject and we haven't even gotten halfway through the agenda, and the public is still sitting here on something that's not here on the agenda that they want us to address or talk about. From the past experiences of sitting here till almost midnight, and I believe I was on the council when we voted to have a time limit of the council meetings due to the fact that we got very tired after a certain time. It didn't matter how many breaks we took. Our brains are just not in gear after a certain time to do the right decisions for the citizens as a whole. The best thing we can do is adopt this, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can go back and make another one. It's, that's the whole point. To sit here and pick it apart just because we don't like one part, until we see if it's going to work or not, we don't know. So that's my take on it.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going to try to get us back to moving forward. I echo the sentiments of Rodney and of Preble in their desire to make sure that public discourse is not infringed. And my feelings on this is let's let the mayor have a shot at it. And frankly, if any one of us identifies a point where the public would not be getting their due process or their opportunity to speak, any one of you make a motion to continue the public comment for longer than the expiration time or any of the parameters set in the resolution. I can't think of an opportunity where or an occasion where I wouldn't also support you with a second on that. We still have the control. This is just a resolution. We can always set aside the order of the day if the circumstances deemed it appropriate. So I'm going to go ahead and make the recommended motion. I move that we adopt Resolution 1815.
I'll second that.
We got a motion and a second. Mr. Morgan, I see that you've got your name on the
Yeah, I
list.
forgot. I'll be very brief. We had this discussion a year ago when we changed our agenda for efficiency. We've had this discussion before with a different mayor, and the fact that we can speak over 30 minutes on why our meetings take so long might be indicative of why our meetings take so long. So sometimes a good look in the mirror would help, and I know that speaks for me too. So I do think it's us, not them, and if it is the public, I think that's a great thing that they're here and they're speaking to us, and I understand your reasoning on the 3-minute time limit. And I do appreciate that, but I also appreciate our discretion to ask questions and extend it. My issue with this is items 8 and 9, because for us on discussion by council members, we don't get an opportunity to talk about stuff, and very rarely, I don't think we ever vote on anything binding with agenda items under our name. And so it's an opportunity for us in the sunshine to talk about issues that are important to us, and then the staff usually gets consensus or direction from the council and brings us back an agenda item. So that's why I like preserving that time to talk about issues, not just about what's going on in the community. And item number 9, I understand, the idea of having a member of the public going straight to city staff, but I also believe that it's the public's right to redress their grievances to me. And if they want to come up here at the end of the meeting, maybe they don't want to meet with Crease, maybe they just want to yell at me, and maybe it deserves to get yelled at, and it's their right to do that. So I'll make an alternate motion to adopt Resolution 1815 with the following changes, which would be removing items 8 and 9.
We have a substitute motion.
Can you clarify, would that then allow public comment at that juncture, Mr. Morgan?
Well, item 9 would remove public comment at the end of the meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it just moves it. It's just 9's going to 3. They can still yell at you. They'll just yell at you earlier in the day.
Okay, never mind. I support it, but I make the motion to adopt the resolution minus item number 8.
Just for clarification, the resolution tonight before y'all actually doesn't have what's listed as item 8 on the agenda cover sheet anyway within it, which would limit the council members' presentation abilities anyway. So if that item needed to be included in there, it would have to come back on another resolution because it's in the agenda cover sheet, but not actually in the resolution itself. So that's...
All right, and seeing how
I
I brought
rescind
on,
my motion.
yeah, we're waiting on a second. No, it dies for lack of second.
Well, I might be
That is
willing to give it a second if I can understand. So I'm looking at page 2 of 2, which shows the that number 8 is the comments from the public. So, Mr. Morgan, when you say eliminate number 8, do you mean eliminate the fact that it's already eliminated? Or
I
do you
believe I should be able to vote under my items that I want to bring forward, and yes, I believe we should be able to use the opportunity to talk about any issue we want, you know.
Chatham, you can, under item 8, where it says this time should be used to bring items forward to be placed on next agenda, not for discussion or action. That's all that is.
I know. I just would rather, I feel more comfortable discussing it.
But
with
here's the
city
problem with that,
council.
Chatham. Let me just tell you the problem with that. Everybody sits through this meeting for 3 hours. This one's going to be 3 hours against, and then they all leave. And then a council member brings up an item, and there's a motion made and a discussion, and we end up voting on something, and the public's not here.
But almost always it comes back to us.
That's a lack of transparency, and that's, and if nothing else, even if it's not a lack of transparency, because we got this camera, and it's on YouTube, if nothing else, it gives the impression that we're trying to pull a fast one on everybody because nobody was here to watch the proceeding. That's the whole purpose behind it.
Yeah, and I know a couple of the items you're referring to, but even if we had voted on those items, we don't have an opportunity to discuss it. So it gives us an opportunity to discuss it before staff puts together an agenda packet. So when they give us the agenda packet, we're comfortable with what's in it. You know, if we're not up here discussing an issue and we want to give something to staff to create for us, how do we know, you know?
The whole purpose behind this is if you have an item that's really important to you, during your time at the very end of the meeting, you bring it up and you say, this is very important to me. And I would like the city manager to put it on the agenda for next meeting so people can attend the meeting and make their public comments on that important issue, and that we'll have all the briefing documents we need for that important issue, and then we'll have a motion, a second, and we'll have a discussion, and we'll have a vote, and everybody's going to be here, not at the last of the meeting. So it has nothing to do with preventing any council member from bringing up or talking about anything important to them. It's just going to put things in an orderly manner to where when we do business, after that issue is brought up, that it's on the agenda for the next meeting. That gives everyone public notice, public opportunity, and allows you council members to do your homework, and you'll be informed on that issue. It's to prevent late night, end of the meeting, everybody's gone, activities that may be true and fair and just, but it just looks bad.
But even the items you're speaking of would have to go back to city staff and then come back to us in the form of an agenda packet in the next meeting where it's advertised and it's in the packet. So what I'm saying.
So why do it twice?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because I'm constrained by the Sunshine Law in my discussion with my fellow council members, and I appreciate the time I have to talk about issues that staff might not have put on the packet. I mean, the Sunshine Law can be incredibly burdensome with collaborating with your colleagues.
Real quick, the
And that is
resolution
an
doesn't have
opportunity
it.
for me to do that.
The resolution doesn't have the language in there, actually. Apparently, that section that y'all referred to as item number 8 in the agenda item cover sheet actually is not in the resolution itself, so that if y'all pass this tonight, it won't have that constraint on the council members, at least in there. Because it appears that the resolution just uses the same language from the previous resolution.
I agree with your points, Mr. Morgan, and further, I still think it's important for the public to be allowed the opportunity to follow up on things at the end of the night after they've had their only opportunity to speak. Again, I'm not worried about trying to hurry and get things along at that point. If someone's still sitting here at the end of the meeting, it's because they've heard something that they want to speak about. It's not because they're just hanging around to see what cool thing we're going to do next. It's because something is on their minds and they want to get it out. And that's the whole point of these public meetings, is allowing the public the opportunity to listen and speak.
That was the whole intent. I'm going to go ahead and call this to question. We have a motion, a second. We had a amended motion.
Substitute motion.
The substitute motion?
But I might as well rescind it if my intent.
Actually, you wanted the public comment section back at the end, so that is something that would change.
No, yeah, I rescind that. That was a
Okay.
misunderstanding.
So, and then the section that limits the council members' rights as it currently exists is actually not in the resolution.
If
It's just
so,
in the agenda coverage.
I rescind.
You'll pass it.
Okay.
I rescind my motion.
All right, so basically, we're back to the original motion in a second. Everybody's made their points. Well, it's 4-2, ayes have it. So moved. And that was my fault, folks. But hopefully, this will help speed up the process, and everyone will participate in the public process at a more efficient clip. All right, we're 4C, second quarter financial investment report. Carice?
Yes, sir. So per the city charter, the finance director must present city financial reports to the city council. We've attached for your review what is the current quarterly financial investment report. If you have any questions regarding this document, I have our finance director, Mr. Bragg Farmer, will answer any questions that you have.
No questions? Move on. Item 4D.
Are we on the public hearings, Mayor? Is that-
4D announcements, city manager. Sorry, ma'am.
That's okay. Okay, so for the announcements, earlier the Week of the Blessings was mentioned, so I just wanted to remind everybody that Wednesday, May 9th, there is the Blessing of the Marketplace, which will be held at Destin United Methodist Church, and lunch will be provided at 11:30. And then on Thursday, May 10th, is the Blessing of the Fleet, which begins at 4 p.m. with a service. Now, we currently have our tree ordinance workshop slated for May 10th, the same time as the Blessing of the Fleet, and I didn't know if the council was interested in changing that to the next week, like perhaps the following Thursday, May 17th, if anyone's interested. Okay. Okay, there is an LPA meeting that night, but I don't think it will interfere with our workshop. Okay, and then I was also, I was asked by the Church of Destin to encourage all of the council members and all of the business members in the community to please come to the Blessing of the Marketplace on Wednesday. Also, the other item that I have is the City Council visioning. We have a facilitator and we have a date of June 15th, which is a Friday, and that's an all-day event. It is a public meeting. We will properly notice it, but that is the annual City Council visioning session for June 15th. It'll start in the morning at 9 and go till 5, and then lunch will be provided. We're still going to look for a venue, but I just wanted you guys to kind of save the date for June 15th. And that's all my announcements, sir.
All right. Do we have any first readings, ordinance not requiring public hearings? Jeff?
No, not tonight, Mayor.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and we will open up.
Public hearings.
Yeah, public hearings for a second reading. I'll let you read all the legalese.
And this one, it's ordinance number 18-01-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for abandonment of the A northerly .1 acre segment of Calhoun Avenue right-of-way, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Oddly enough, the procedure for right-of-way vacations has the quasi-judicial hearing as the first reading, and that's what they did at the last reading, or at the last meeting, Mayor. And so tonight, they don't actually have to present the evidence that they did last time, because they've done that once already, and that's, actually, the resolution y'all just passed will fix that issue. All readings will be public hearings from here on out, but tonight, they don't have to get up here and present the same type of evidence, but if they do want to add anything to it, they can. They should probably at least introduce themselves and tell you what they're asking for, but it's quasi-legislative, not quasi-judicial tonight.
Okay, do I have, Brad, would you like to come up and say anything, or?
Curtis Gwynn, in the essence of saving time, we have nothing to add. We'll be glad to answer any questions if anyone has one.
I don't see any questions.
Mayor, I'll make the recommended motion. It is moved that City Council approve ordinance 18-01-CN.
We have a second? We have a second. Any discussion?
And make sure you allow the public to, if anyone from the public wants, before you vote. You do, but the motion's fine. It still stands.
All right, so stand by for discussion. Anyone else? Anyone else from the public would like to comment on this ordinance? Seeing nobody raising their hands, we'll go ahead at this time and close the public hearing portion of this. We have a motion, we have a second. Seeing no further discussion, let's go ahead and vote. Oh, you didn't? I didn't.
Quick question, Mr. Burns. Did you say this is not the resolution that we voted on? That it was different?
Are you talking about the resolution that y'all just voted on previously?
No, on this one.
Or the public hearing tonight?
Yeah.
No, it's an ordinance, and what happened, the previous procedure that's still in place tonight as of their hearing, oddly enough, in the Code of Ordinances and the application itself have the public hearing as they're at the first reading.
Okay, I
And
got
so the resolution y'all just passed is going to make all readings of all ordinances a public hearing, so that issue will never happen again, so everything's straight across the board.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining.
All right, let's go ahead and cast our votes. Ayes have it. Ordinance 18-01-CN passes. Jeff?
Yeah, ordinance number 18-06-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to establishing the Technical Review Committee to streamline the process of development review, providing for amendment to Article 2 Administration, revising the development review process, providing for amendments to Article 3 Definitions, Yard, providing for amendment to Article 5 General Provisions, providing for modification to Article 6 Concurrency Management System, providing for amendment to Article 20 Building Regulations, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And we're here on first reading, and it is a public hearing, Mayor.
So we'll go ahead and open up public hearing. Anybody from the audience would like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing no public comments, to entertain a motion.
Mayor, does the staff have anything they want to at least explain on the...
The staff is prepared to answer questions. If the council would like a brief explanation, we're prepared to provide that as well, at the pleasure of the council. Okay. I would like to turn this over to our Community Development Director, Ms. Breiler.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is an ordinance that staff and the Community Development Department thought we would bring forward that corrected several Scrivener's errors in the Land Development Code, as well as brought forth an initiative for a TRC, or a Technical Review Committee, that we recognize the current process that we do development order review is in a bubble, per se, that the application is sent from one department and then that application is sent to another. And so we lose the synergy between each department and bringing forth the initiatives of the council, so that we may be making comments in public works regarding a project, and then community development may be making comments that were completely contradictory to public works' comments. So we need to have opportunity, as the council needs opportunity, to speak together and review a project per the initiatives of city council. So that was why we had, and it's my understanding that the city once had a technical review committee, and that was retired for the technical review team. But now I think that that process was streamlined initially, but it has lost its ability to get things through in a timely manner. Happy to answer any other specific questions that you might have regarding the concurrency issues or the de minimis language. I know we have levels of service for each of our infrastructure elements that they're not consistent across the board. It requires an evaluation of what the level of service currently is to be able to speak to that.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Bryla, you brought up the de minimis language. I know I was looking through the concurrency requirement. We inserted some language in here that was going to remove the concurrency requirement for developments that have a de minimis impact, which sounds fine, but how do we define de minimis?
Yes, sir. Thank you. That was what I was saying in our comprehensive plan under our CIE, or our capital improvements element. We have levels of service for each of our concurrency infrastructure components. So it's traffic, storm, sewer, wastewater, water, recreation. And so in each of those level of service, we have a base. And so as a new project comes forward, if the technical review committee feels like it's going to infringe on that base or that level of service, then the applicant needs to provide us with a current existing condition of that level of service, and then any impacts that they may have. And so if we would determine it de minimis, it wouldn't have a substantial impact, or it would be less than. For traffic or transportation, it gives us a specific that it's 25% of the current flows on that roadway, but there are consistent measures for each of those infrastructure elements. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, to a degree. I think my biggest heartburn being up here has always been that, we're the elected officials up here. I've never been comfortable with delegating a tremendous amount of the responsibility for development review to staff, because frankly we're the ones that will take the bullets for things that just happen to get approved, that the general public didn't think that maybe the auto zone or maybe something else that they just see out there and they don't agree with happens to be de minimis, but we waved it on through. And my concern is just where's that threshold, and where do we have those safeguards. I had one other question. And perhaps Ms. Kopp can help, but I believe right now, is there any council review of minor developments? Right now, it would go through, just so everybody on this council understands, I think, and for media as well, if somebody applies and they have what is called a minor development, that would go to the TRC for review, and then the development order would be issued conceivably after the review, and it would never come to the council for up or down. And that's different with a major review, because if it's a major development, then it would go to the TRC, ultimately would have to come to us for a final approval, correct?
Yes, sir, and what we added in this that wasn't in place prior was that we recognized there were some developments of a magnitude that staff didn't feel comfortable with meeting those requirements. So we've written in here anything, non-residential development that's greater than 25,000 square feet would come to the council, whether it was major or minor. And then there are also those projects that require 50% of, that they want more than 50% of their on-site parking to be off-site. Those would come to the council. So there are a lot of safeguards in place to prevent me, for lack of a better term, of having ultimate power to do that.
Sure, I understand. I'm going to yield to fellow council.
All right, Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question about language concerning the composition of the Technical Review Committee. If you look on page 9 of 11, section 10, part 2, it has a different composition of the Technical Review Team than it does back if you go on the first part where it's page 2 of 3. And I'm wondering why the difference in the members.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramswell. On page 7, under membership, that's the minimum that we would want at the table to speak to the impacts of a project. And in 2.26.02, there's always the ability, depending on if it's a special review team or we need additional experts in their fields, that we could add or subtract from that. But on 10, that it's just the Technical Review Committee is composed of, but not limited to, city staff. So it's not contradicting what was presented before. It's either it's a group that is not limited to, but at a minimum, those things. Did that make sense?
Right. When I read, and I'm not trying to nitpick, I'm just trying to make sure we're consistent, is composed of, but not limited to. So this, to me, indicates that all the following persons are included in the team. But if you go back to the other one, it's smaller.
I would agree that the one on 9, because we don't need gas representatives and electric and cable representatives at the Technical Review Committee, because a project in my history will find electric service and gas and cable if they're required. It's not something that's going to hold up development. And so we can strike those to make it consistent with the previous page. If that would appease the council, we're just looking at, we need these basic members, public services.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just concerned that someone would look at that and take the opportunity to say, oh, well, my application was denied, but there wasn't a gas representative and there wasn't an electric representative on there, so actually your team wasn't what it was. You see what I'm saying?
Certainly.
That's my concern. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Any further questions? I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Do we want to make a substitute I guess I could make a substitute motion with, as presented with the changes suggested, or Mr. Destin, did you have some changes actually, or were you just clarifying? I can't recall. I mean, is my point big enough that it's something that y'all feel should be addressed?
We can simply delete the inconsistency from page 9 to make it match 7. If you want to recommend approval, we can do it with that one change, and then come back for second reading with the revised ordinance.
Yeah, this is the first reading, so
Okay.
there's time for a revision.
I'm trying to find it unless somebody has it handy. Where are we? There we are, okay. Well, I thought I had it. Okay, recommended motion. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 18-06-LC on first reading and direct staff to schedule a second reading for final adoption.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Ayes have it, so moved. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Is that good, everyone? You ready? It's time. We'll do a 5-minute break unless, Jeff, are you okay with that? Because we're in the ordinance process? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, 5-minute break, everyone. Hold your feet to the fire, so don't visit. Do your business. seats, and we'll get this thing started here in about 60 seconds, as soon as our attorney shows back up. Everybody take a seat, turn around, put your hands in your lap.
Can we do the
Zip it.
Can we do the hokey pokey?
We'll call this meeting back to order. Thank you for your patience. We are still in the public hearing process. And Jeff, you have the microphone.
Ordinance number 18-08-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, repealing ordinance number 17-23-LC, otherwise known as the Tree Ordinance, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for repealer, providing for removal from the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. We're here on first reading. And it is a public hearing.
Do we have any comments from the audience that would like to speak on the appeal? Step up to the microphone. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 18-08-LC on first reading and direct staff to schedule a second reading for final adoption.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Skip?
If we repeal this, so then what happens to the trees in the interim?
They will still be treated under the Land Development Code, I believe, that's already in existence.
So it's just business as usual before we
It goes back to what was in place prior to the moratorium.
The big trees will still be protected. Best, right? No.
No, not really. No.
That means,
They can cut a tree at will.
You're still required to get a permit.
all right, we have a motion, a second, and no further discussion. Ayes have it. So moved.
Ordinance number 18-09-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, providing for modification to Article 8 Transportation, providing for amendments to vehicle parking standards, modifications to handicap parking for special parking districts, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is first reading, and it is a public hearing.
Would anybody from the general public like to step up to the microphone? Have any comments on this ordinance? First reading? Seeing none? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I have a question for staff.
Go ahead, Mr. Destin.
So, can you guys give me just sort of a background on where this came from and what we're trying to accomplish here?
Certainly, sir. I'd like to turn this over to Ms. Breiler to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The changes that affected Article 8 were necessary as we have had several developers come in with assumptions that they could receive credits for things that they were never intended to circumvent the requirements of the code or on-site parking, only to work with strategies that could result in reduction of on-site spaces. Changes are also suggested to remove antiquated language in Article 8. Also, when the LPA heard this item, they suggested that they add, or that they remove the language that says in close proximity to a city garage, could you get credit for that parking? Given people a break now for what they may or may not have in the future. So the LPA agreed to that unanimously, and so we've added that into the language of this.
Okay, thank you. Rodney, before I give you the microphone, do you have a question or do you just want to discuss? Because we'll go ahead and entertain a motion in a second and then we'll discuss this. Can I get a motion? Not everybody at once.
I move that the City Council approve a proposed ordinance 18-09-LC on first reading and direct staff to schedule a second reading for final adoption.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 4, it's going to be on page 3 of 4. In lieu of parking fees. Do I understand it to be, is this for someone that is developing or building an establishment? This is giving them, if they lease or rent parking spaces from a parking garage or public parking lot, this gives them the ability to do that and not provide parking or that amount of parking on their own site? Is that what this is reading, or?
This is existing language, sir, that we're taking out the Tier 3 and the Tier 1 and 2, that antiquated language, but it also requires that if somebody's requesting more than 50% of their required parking to be off-site, that it come to the City Council for a vote.
The way this reads is they can go a minimum of 30%, but not, and a maximum of 50% of the parking required, but non-resident parking may be provided at the city parking facilities. So it reads as somebody could build a restaurant, and if they're required to have 100 parking places, they can go down and rent or lease parking spaces from a public parking lot is up to 50% and only have 50 parking places on site and lease 50 parking places from a public facility.
I think places like Beauchamp's does that now, don't they?
But is that, yeah, I mean, we can do it now, but I'm saying, is it people, if I want to go build a restaurant and I'm required to have 100 parking places at my restaurant, the way this reads is I can go lease 50 parking places from the city's parking lot and only build 50 on my property and have 50 across the street. Is that not correct?
And could you share with me what number you're looking at, sir, in 80613?
It's a number.
Oh, so he's looking at number 4. And yes, sir, this is current language. We didn't change the current language because there was we didn't get direction to change the current language.
So again, according to this, I could only would be required to build 50 parking places as long as I'm leasing 50 from the city.
Sir, we wouldn't, in the Community Development Department, we wouldn't allow you to lease cities' public parking spaces. If you found a private lot that had the adequate number of spaces within the required distance, the quarter-mile distance from your establishment, you could do that.
But that's not what this says.
We do require, if you are a business in the multimodal districts, that you could, in lieu of providing on-site parking, pay in essence, pay for those sites or those parking spaces, which we have developers that have done that up to $250,000.
Right.
Can you scroll up so that the public can see what it is being discussed? Keep going a little bit more. Yes.
Yes,
right there.
that right there. That's where it reads to me that city parking facilities, a minimum of 30% and a maximum of 50% of the required non-residential parking may be provided at city parking facilities by paying in lieu of parking fees.
I have a question just to follow up on Mr. Braden's. If you're not done, I'll give you the microphone right back. Is this language is existing language now? These are they're now. So there's this changes you're recommending has nothing to do with this existing language at this particular time, correct? Mr. Braden, you have anything else?
So this is still existing. This is not part of the changes that was in there. Sounds like this needs to be changed as well. Because people can go build a facility, and I mean, if that is true, they just build 50 parking places and at least 50 from you or somebody else or from the city. If that city parking lot is full, then this establishment doesn't have enough parking for their businesses.
I think, if I remember right, AJ's bought that lot across the street just specifically so they could cover their parking requirements because they didn't have enough on-site parking. They did it under the existing ordinance, correct? So your changes don't address this at all. We'd have to revisit this as a total different project. Chris, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, sir. And it's just reiterating on the point that you're making is that this is already existing. You can see whatever's been changed has strike through. So we just said that it had to be an existing parking facility. They can't hedge it on proposed. And at the bottom, we're taking away Tier 3 and major development. If it is the will of the council that they want to review this, discuss it, make changes to it, then that's something that we can bring back at a next meeting. But this, we had no direction to make any changes to the existing language. So if the council wants this language to change, then I would ask that that be made in a separate direction. separate from what we're trying to do here.
And we just passed a new comp plan, and so the land development code is going to have to be addressed, and this is something we could take up at that point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think what we need to do, just so we can go ahead and get this particular motion and second completed, is for the changes that are recommended by staff that we come to a vote. I see Ms. Ramswell would like to make one more comment on this, but that's basically where we're at, right? Okay, Ms. Ramswell.
You finished, Mr. Braden?
Apparently.
So if we are taking
Sorry.
notes on things to address sooner rather than later, in my opinion, one of the things that really bothers me when reading this is the fact that we're saying a minimum of 30% and a maximum of 50% may be provided by the city parking facility by paying the in lieu parking fees. That to me is almost like, pay us some money and then you can have your parking elsewhere. That doesn't look good to me. So personally, that's something I'd like to see addressed in the future. As Mr. Braden said, sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Ms. Ramswell. Mr. Morgan.
Just a couple questions. So there's very little change to this. Y'all added 4 or 5 sentences, correct?
Yes, sir. The impact, we've been getting developers to come in to say, I'm automatically guaranteed a 20% reduction in the amount of parking, and that's not what the code says.
Sure.
The intent is that you may get up to a 20% if you provide the city those multimodal characteristics like additional boat parking, additional bike parking, sidewalks, accessibility, and those kind of things.
Sure. Yeah, I don't like the, and if I'm reading this right, 18-06-18.06.03, subsection B, the handicap parking, moving that off-site provided that there's a continuous ADA accessible pedestrian connection between the off-site shared parking area. My problem with that is, and I'm assuming that's like a trolley from the off-site parking area. My problem with that is like, who's going to enforce it? You know, we have a hard time enforcing stuff, and nothing against the city. It's just difficult to do it with our resources. So I don't like that because it just seems weird to get rid of the handicap spots in front of a business, move them off-site, and then have a trolley. Is that utilized often?
Excuse me, it wasn't the intent necessarily to have a trolley to accommodate. It's just to have a complete, clear accessibility through the lively street network. And so
potentially we could have handicap spots move from on-site parking, move to off-site parking across Highway 98, and then ask the handicapped customers to cross Highway 98. I understand.
Except that there has to be a continuous accessible pedestrian connection. So if it's off-site, they have to show where it's a continuous ADA compliant accessible pedestrian connection between
like a
off-site
crosswalk with,
and primary
like an
on-site
ADA accessible
building.
crosswalk, right?
And it has to be compliant right onto the primary on-site building entrance. So they have to be able to get from wherever they are everything has to be ADA compliant right up to the front of the building.
And our crosswalks are ADA compliant?
Yes, they are.
So we would be asking handicapped people to park off-site and go across our crosswalks to the building? And that way they could reduce their handicap spots on-site?
As long as it's available within the restrictions of the code.
Okay. I understand the intent of reducing on-site parking, you know, in the spirit of our multimodal transportation district, and in hopes that one day Destin will be a more multimodal community, at least the Harbor District, which it's not, which is evident through our pedestrian fatalities. And I spoke with Carice at length about it. And sometimes I feel like with the multimodal stuff, like I agree, like if you have bike racks, I think you should have a parking reduction. If we were a more bike-friendly community, which we certainly have plans to be, and it's in our vision to be that, but, you know, are you putting the cart before the horse? Maybe, but if you build it, they will come too. So the handicap thing, I don't like at all. I think handicap spots should be close to the door of any business. That's just seems normal. Other than that, so is this going to, will this allow for people to get parking reductions in our public parking lots?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So this says, if in the event, Carice, our discussion about parking garages and this ordinance, how does that play into, how does our potential parking lots, parking garages play into this ordinance here?
So the question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that will a business be able to meet their normal parking requirements by claiming that there's adequate parking available in a parking garage across the street?
No, sir, that they won't be able to. As I shared before, that's public parking,
Sure.
and it's not designated for private investment or private gain.
Okay.
Also, that's one of the reasons that the LPA struck that existing code language that said that you can use it as a proposed garage.
Okay. Well, good. That was my one hang-up, so thank you.
Are you done, Mr. Morgan? Go, Mr. Destin.
Yes, I'm going to make a motion, but it's going to be different from the recommended motion. I'm going to move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance 18-09-LC on first reading with striking of the language regarding handicap parking that's been added. That is 8.06.03 subsection B. And furthermore, I would like staff to come together and let's get a workshop put together for us to take a look at some of the in-lieu parking fee structure language. I don't mind if it ends up being woven in with some of the LDC changes that we're going to be entertaining, but it's something we need to look at.
All right, get back to your motion then, real quick. Okay, that's the motion. And we have a motion.
I'll second it, Mayor.
A substitute motion. Who made the original motion? They got to okay the substitute. Do you remember?
I don't think anybody
No.
pulled the first motion there.
Huh?
Councilmember Destin, I believe, made the
Okay,
first
well
motion.
then he doesn't need us to approve himself. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Braden, I cut you off earlier. You good? Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and without any further discussion. Ayes have it, unanimous. And Mr. Destin spoke about having a workshop for further land development code issues that address parking specifically. If we could go ahead and get something put on the next agenda for us to consider, or work with the city manager on a workshop scenario where we could address some of this. I think it was pretty apparent everybody on the council wants to address the original language in the code.
Sir, what I'll probably do is contact council members to get clarification of what the workshop is to contain, because I'd have the language from 80612D4, but I'm not sure if there's other considerations to look at, so I will contact council members, try to get an idea of what exactly we're workshopping above and beyond that particular clause, and then we'll look at some dates Again, June, it would probably be past June 15th.
Sounds good, and I can work with you and the staff on an agenda for that workshop, if everybody's okay with that. All right, we're going to move on to, because I think that's the end of public hearing and reading of the ordinances. Move on to item 7 tonight, consent agenda, no public comments.
We pulled item 7B.
Yeah, that one was pulled.
Mayor, I'll make the motion to accept A and C.
Second.
We have a recommendation to accept A and C. We have a second. Go ahead and vote. Ayes have it, unanimous, so moved.
So I pulled item 7B just because I had some concern with the way it was written and what actually including it in the consent agenda would approve. So if staff or council can address that.
And earlier, I know we talked, Ms. Ramswell, and after talking to Ms. Kopp and the city manager again, they would actually, given the issue of wanting to kind of go and address all this now, maybe continue this to the next city council meeting and actually notice it so the applicant can come here and they can go and deal with it then at that point in time and not deal with the technical issue that was in the application. So, if y'all don't mind.
Certainly, that's fine. Do I need to make said motion? I'll go ahead and make a motion then to continue this item to the next council meeting so that it can be publicly noticed and presented at that time.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ayes have it, so moved. It'll be on the next agenda. Moving right along, we got comments, presentations from the mayor, council, land use attorney, city attorney. No public comments at this time. Starting off, AA with Mr. Braden.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a few things tonight. First of all, I just wanted to extend my appreciation. I've been able to attend a few different events in the past few weeks. One of them was the Good Citizenship Award at Destin Elementary School. I also handed out the Boys and Girls Club recognition, notifying them of being National Week of Boys and Girls Clubs. Also, we were the proud hosts of the Okaloosa County League of Cities dinner, which was wonderful. We had several officials from all over the area come and attend, and it's always a wonderful event. It was held at Tuscany Restaurant, which, if you've ever been, is just a terrific local Italian place. And then most recently, Teresa Abear was there as well, and Skip Overdeer for the Arbor Day celebration that was held over at the elementary school. So it's always great for us to get out and participate in a lot of these events. Tomorrow, I think I'll actually be going to Leadership Okaloosa, which will be a wonderful event as well, and I very much look forward to that. I did have a question I wanted to pose to city staff or manager, whomever is more appropriate. I had gotten a call earlier this week saying that someone had heard that work on Noriega Point had been ceased because of turtle nesting. Did that occur at some point, or was that just some rumor that began being spread?
Yeah, we haven't been notified of that, no.
Good, because apparently that was going around, so I just wanted to clarify that.
What had happened, the reason they had pulled their equipment away is they have to put some back supports to the back of the rocks, and they were waiting on that construction crew to show up. If anybody's been by there the last 2 days, you'll see that, well, actually the last 5 or 6 days, they're back out on the point every single day going back to work. So that there was a delay between the guys that laid the rock and getting that work done, and then when they're finished with that, they're going to backfill all that, so it'll all be, you won't be able to see it, and then they'll finish the dunes.
And then the last thing I wanted to bring up tonight, I actually brought it up on my Facebook page because I wanted to get the public to weigh in a little bit. Since I've moved here, I've always been fascinated with Old Pier, which, as you all know, it's just the little stubs from the pier that was taken out by a hurricane. It made me think, why do we not have a public fishing pier? Obviously, we have the Okaloosa Island Pier, which is utilized quite heavily. But here we are in our mission. Obviously, we say we're the best a world-class fishing resort. Well, we don't have a public marina, and we don't have a public fishing pier. And then I read that South Walton is actually working on getting a public fishing pier going. And so I just sort of posed the question to the public and asked, would y'all like to have a public fishing pier here? And overwhelmingly, the response was yes. But of course, as you might imagine, the next question is where? And everybody seemed really on board with Henderson Beach. Now, of course, that is state-run, but with that in mind, there might be a really good opportunity to work with them, maybe even try to get BP funds, TDC money, and try to do something like that. I know we had, for our 2017 vision, one of our goals was to actually discuss getting a public marina, and we haven't made any forward momentum really on that I'm aware of. But this could be one way to start trying to get something like that going. And I know our space constraints are limited, so just something I wanted to pose for thought, and if council is interested in me having staff look into something like this and just drawing up some ideas or getting some numbers or whatever might be involved, I certainly thought it was worth bringing up and suggesting. So can I ask, does anyone on council have any thoughts one way or the other?
If you could pull that off, we would name you council member Superwoman. Probably the biggest challenge would be parking, let alone a site. And I've lived here a long time. I've watched the Okaloosa Pier get knocked down 3 times, 2 times, and millions and millions and millions of dollars. There's big challenges. It would be way cool and really great for the community, but I'm just not sure that this city has wherewithal to overcome that. That'd be something we probably, have to work with Okaloosa County, of course, and then with the state. Those piers are extremely cost prohibitive. Is probably the worst part.
Maybe that's something, I know, City Manager, you mentioned earlier our visioning being on June 15th. Maybe that's something you can jot down as an idea for us to just bat around and discuss the possibilities, especially since we've not had forward momentum on a marina. So,
and the marina discussion was actually part of the Port of Destin and Harbor Waterways District discussion, and we're still working on that. We just don't have anything to bring forward. We did apply for a grant today because at the end of the day, to put together these plans, it takes money that we don't have. So it's not that it's just disappeared. It was a report, and we are working on it.
Great. Thanks for the update. Yeah, I know we've talked in the past, too, about how we ought to have a billfish tournament. So, lots of ways that I feel like we really need to start re-embracing ourselves and our image as the fishing village, things that we really need to try to come together and do. And in my opinion, these are things that TDC and BP money could really, really go towards. So anyway, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ranswell. I'm with you on that. I'd rather the money be spent on something like that versus a bypass around Crestview. Mr. Overdyer.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. First off, let's get the one that's already written down here. My previous board member for the Harbor CRA resigned, and so at this time I'm asking for council approval of Charles Duplantis for the Harbor CRA.
Can we entertain a motion?
That's the motion.
Requires a motion.
Okay.
Well, I make the
That's
motion.
the motion. Second?
I'll second that.
Motion second. Any discussion? Let's go ahead and vote.
Okay.
You're going to have to come up with a new name.
Well, I've already checked with the clerk, with our clerk, and he said there was no one has put an application in. So
I did check with that.
I thought we had someone that had applied, Mr. Stevens.
John, have you applied, buddy?
We have two harbor, boy, you have the harbors and waterways, and you also have harbor CRA. There's two different ones.
Yeah, and to be on the CRA, there's some requirements that have to be met. You have to be a business owner or...
Which he is, and
okay.
also is a resident of Destin. But, okay, I'll find somebody else. That's the way it's going to be. Secondly, Ms. Ramswell, the pier. Growing up with the old pier, the Burnett family ran it for awesome, and they can outdo any hamburger place in this area back then. I think the mayor stated it best. If we can come up with the parking and you can come up with the land that we can, prime piece of beach land we can get it on, hey, I'm for it too. So, I talked with David Campbell earlier. We had a report. I had a report of people using the Noriega Point area where it's still under construction, and he was going to get back with me on that. And so I'm hoping that'll happen shortly, because I'd like to also recommend that we get some signage out there as soon as possible where they can and cannot put their boats. We don't want to lose the dune we have. So that was one of the things I had out there. Secondly, we had Founders Day this past Saturday. Had a lot of family members in attendance and several of our council members that were able to make it, so I'm thankful for that. That went well. And on one other note, if the staff could, or if you can get, I don't know who handles it, Parks or Recreation or whatever, on the signage. We have a very, very faded bicycle sign at the intersection of Benning and Kelly, going west. You can't even read it. It just needs to be replaced. And last but not least, for me tonight, on May the 27th, which is the Sunday before Memorial Day, which the city will be getting a formal invitation, Village Baptist Church will be dedicating our prayer garden. The interesting fact of this is a member of our church who likes to travel a lot found a lifelike statue of Jesus Christ hugging a World War II soldier in bronze. He purchased it, donated it to the church. The church, after going through all the permitting process and everything here through the city, has now got a memorial garden for our armed forces. You are also encouraged, if you have someone, we have bricks that are in the ground there with the armed forces people on it, of those who served. And it will be at 11:30 on Sunday, May the 27th. We're going to be cutting our service short, so we hope that as many members of the council and other officials of the county can show up, and as many veterans as possible. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Marler.
Mayor, can I ask our clerk a question?
Sure.
Could you possibly provide us with a list of who has open seats and on what committee? Because I know there was some confusion that day, and obviously still going on if we've got someone here that submitted an application that somehow has been overlooked.
I seem to remember that. I believe Mr. Stevens had put one in, so I'll have to double check that for the Harbor CRA Advisory Committee. I will double check his application, because I know he put in last time, but he was not appointed. But I'm thinking that was for the Harbor CRA, so I'll double check.
Great. Yeah, if you can just provide us with that, and it might be helpful for those of us that might have an empty slot.
Yeah,
We can
I'll
look
provide
at it.
you a list of all the committees.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I don't have a whole lot tonight other than I just want to offer some congratulatory language over to my good friend, Mr. Burns. I believe he did not draw an opponent in his race for judge, and I believe that makes you a judge-elect, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah. Thank you.
Here come the judge.
Well,
So guess what we got to do?
we don't want to lose you, but congratulations.
Not to cut ahead of, you're stuck with me till the end of the year, because I don't take the bench till January of 2019. So I got a ways to go. So.
Okay. Well, we got you for a little while longer. Nothing else, Mayor.
Councilmember Morgan.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Congratulations, Jeff, and that's it.
I got a couple things. First of all, as you all know, I've been real involved with working on fishery policy for the charter fleet and the commercial industry for a number of years. trying to represent those industries at the national and state level. But now that I'm mayor-elect, I still plan on being involved in the fishery issues, being the mayor of the luckiest fishing village in the world, let alone America. So, but to best represent all stakeholders, I've always been on that side of the discussion, and I want to take into account what our recreational anglers would like or need or have a voice in that same setting. You know, that way I can step up, and when I'm giving testimony or up in D.C., I can speak for our entire fishing community. So what I'd like to propose is form a committee of recreational anglers, and I'd just like to get input from the city manager on how we need to do that. I got Ken Creel, who's a Destin resident and also sits on the National Marine Fisheries Private Angler Recreational Advisory Panel, to get me some names of people that would like to participate on this committee. So I could bring those names to the council members, and each council member could support them, or we could just do it as maybe an outside city commission. But I want to hear from our anglers and be able to speak to these issues as a whole.
I have some CCA member roles you can take a look at to recruit.
Mayor, you'd need to get the council, if you want it to be like a city board or committee, to just amend the provision in the code of ordinances to add all the list of boards, and then you could do that at that time, then list the requirements for it if you have an idea what you want to do.
Oh, could you put that on the next agenda, Carice?
I can work with you to put something on the next agenda.
All right, and then what I'll do then is I'll get those guys to fill out an application to serve on a committee. That sounds good. Also, you know, we've got a workshop to revitalize, revamp, and rebuild a tree ordinance at a upcoming workshop, and I just want to throw something out there against the wall, see if it sticks. Before this thing is listed as a commission, and I'm responsible with appointing those commission members, and they were responsible for actually writing the ordinance, and that didn't turn out too well. So maybe I think we might want to formulate a tree ordinance committee, and then either have our staff write the ordinance, or as Mr. Destin recommended, maybe an outside consultant to do it. However it went down last time, because I didn't participate in that, that didn't work out too well. So I don't know if anybody would just, maybe we can have that discussion as well at the next thing, or maybe right now if anybody has any ideas.
Well, right now, sir, the language that establishes the tree commission is just been repealed for first reading. So it would be establishing in the new ordinance tree committee.
Going to the same kind of portion of the ordinances that the the recreational fishing committee will go into, and now that might be something that might take a little more massaging than the fishing one. So I don't know if you want me to bring something back at the next meeting, or if you want to provide some input ahead of time.
Well, I've got some volunteers. A couple of them are in the audience. What we've run into, there's in that present ordinance, there's some specific seats that you have to fill, and a couple of them, like a designer, landscape designer, difficult. Attorney is too. So maybe if we do it a committee where each council member appoints a member to that committee, that might be a better format, and we'll still get the public input on how to design
I could do that by the next meeting. That's pretty simple. If you just want to make it similar to the other committees, we could just cut out all those requirements. Do you want to cut out the portion where you appoint every one of them?
Yeah, I think you all would feel a lot more comfortable if you nominated an individual to be on the committee versus me appointing them. Not to skirt that responsibility. I mean, I'll do that if we want to keep that format. If anybody would weigh in, or if they don't care, then we'll just keep it clean and do it.
I'll bring back something. It'll be basically an amendment to the same ordinance. We'll just add the fishing committee, and it'll clean up the tree commission and rename it committee.
I just want to bring that up to give everybody a heads up. We'll see it in the briefing material, and we're going to have a workshop, so actually we can all, if you attend, we can talk about that in the workshop as well. And the last thing, I went to a briefing at the ECAR building out in Walton County on Monday, and last Monday. And what it was a briefing on the Burt-Harris Act. And it was done by the attorneys that helped formulate the language of that act in Tallahassee. It was a Tallahassee group. And there's some really alarming things that were revealed in that. During our comp plan discussion, the passing of a comp plan, one of the things I warned everyone was, the concern about mitigating our exposure to litigation under Burt-Harris. And what I found out since then, through staff, is that our coverage in Burt-Harris lawsuits is only $100,000 annually. Not per occurrence, but annually. And during the course of this briefing, one of the things they were talking about was most cities in their comp plans, land development codes, they always institute language, which is in the case before this last, when we voted the comp plan, is usually grandfather clauses. And that's to protect the city, for people that have development orders or have already applied for permits so they can't sue. So one of the key things that was brought out is the cities should try to protect themselves to mitigate legal proceedings. That being said, you're still going to have them. So you try to give yourself the most amount of protection. And what exposes the city to litigation is key words in that act of unreasonable burden, existing use, and the property owner. And so those are things that need to be considered in any comp plan or land development code. But really what got me the most through all this discussion, there was two things that were brought out. One is, somebody asked, how many Burt-Harris lawsuits are won or lost? And what was really telling is when the attorney says there's not many, and the act's been on the books for quite some time now, and I think 2 or 3 have made it to the Florida Supreme Court and have actually made changes to the Burt-Harris Act. But the reason there's so few court decisions in them is during the course of the Burt-Harris Act, the expense and the reality to the cities is they end up settling almost in every case, because once those appraisals come in, then that's a real uphill battle for the city to claim when somebody files lost damages. More importantly in those claims is you may or may not get compensated for your legal fees. And so somebody asked, what does it cost to file a Burt-Harris lawsuit? And they said anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. But that's on the plaintiff's side. The expense to the city is to defend itself, they got to pay for an appraiser or appraisal that costs anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 a lick. So you could see that it wouldn't take, and this is not even taken into considerations the damages if somebody makes a $3 million claim or a $5 million claim or anything like that. So what I would like maybe us to have a discussion at the next meeting is to revisit the grandfather clause language that our land use attorney put it on the agenda so we can have a little bit more concise discussion about that, because there were so many moving parts during the comp plan discussion, and the comp plan is passed, and so you don't have to take any action after the discussion. You may sit pat with the motion that we passed, but on that issue alone, one of our responsibilities to this city and our taxpayers is being fiscally aware of mitigating exposure to legal costs like this. This is a possible, as it was explained to me in this discussion, something like this could bankrupt our city, and it could do it very easily. And I'm not too sure that we had an in-depth enough discussion about that particular aspect of Burt Harris. And maybe, Jeff, we could, if you would like to bring in a land use attorney outside of our own and yours, or you guys could maybe, have that discussion and allow our council members to ask some hard questions about the grandfather clause, risk mitigation, stuff like that. It was very eye-opening.
I don't want to step on Ms. Copp's toes, but I mean, if y'all want 2 land use attorneys there, I can bring one of the land use attorneys from our firm if y'all want. But they would probably tend to defer to Ms. Kopp just out of respect, unless.
I must say, I'm a little confused as to why you'd want to potentially bring in an outside one, because she actually wrote in a very extensive and thorough grandfather clause that I supported.
I don't want to bring, so I was just throwing something out there. This is the purpose of this thing, is just to kind of get this discussion going, to prepare something for us to consider on the agenda for the next meeting. Now, I just threw that out there in my discussion. I don't have a particular desire to bring other attorneys, but I would just like to have at least our attorneys, just to have a little bit more in-depth discussion on, is the old grandfather language give us the mitigation we need to reduce risk? Is the one that she wrote that didn't make it into the comp plan a better idea? I just think that to do due diligence, we ought to have that discussion. It may not change anything, but I wish y'all could have came to this meeting, because it was a real eye-opener, and I have grave concerns about our risk under Burt Harris lawsuits. And to compound this is we're fixing to take up short-term rentals. And in, I think it is Amelia Island, they just passed a 2+2 occupancy ordinance, which I think a lot of people here probably agree with. And they've had 55 Burt Harris lawsuits for a total of $6.6 million filed against them. And that's a whole nother subject outside the comp plan. So these are things that we need to kind of take into consideration. It may not change anything, but at least we've done due diligence and we can defend ourselves to the public that, hey, we've explored all this and we thought that this was a good idea or this wasn't a good idea.
Did you speak up and sort of tell them our side of the story at this meeting and let them know our perspective and our input?
I was just really a casual observer. I just kind of let them. There was a lot of realtors and management companies people there. Of course, they have concerns about the new development code, and they were asking all the really good questions, because I guess they got more invested in it than me. The only thing I spoke up is when I asked about risk mitigation and grandfather clauses. I asked them if that's a good idea, a bad idea. Does that, can that protect the city as a whole? And that was their answer was, you need to have some kind of language because Burt Harris lawsuits in any new change in a comp plan are kind of a common thing. But the 2 things that struck me was the cost, and more importantly, the fact that normally the cities end up having to settle, which means it's going to cost us.
Mayor, if I might just chime in on the Amelia Island or Marco Island lawsuit, I don't think any of those cases were successful, or they haven't been yet. But I will say this about, and you can sue anybody for anything in this country. That doesn't mean they'll be successful. And I believe, in my view, when I'm voting to pass an ordinance, we have 2 attorneys here that are fully competent and capable of writing ordinances that should protect us from litigation, and I'm not going to operate out of fear of being sued, because I've been threatened to, people have threatened me personally to have me personally sued for actions I've taken on the dais, and I can't, maybe 20 times people have sued us and threatened in public while I've been sitting here in 2 years to sue the city. And you can't operate, I'm not going to operate out of fear of that, and that's why we have attorneys, and I have good faith in our 2 attorneys that they're not going to give us ordinances that are going to set us up for financial ruin.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not saying, I'm not operating out of fear, but she did write us a nice grandfather clause and we got rid of it, so that's true too. That's why I want to re-explore it. okay? So
Understand you
that's
want
all
to bring public
I'm just bringing it out. I'm going on public record saying that we ought to just take a few moments of our time at the next meeting or the meeting after that and explore where we're at and do the best we can to be responsible to our tax-paying community and the city itself. Because we all know that we have issues with, we have so many great ideas, and funding's always an issue with it. So we don't want to put ourselves in jeopardy of that. And if, like I said, if it doesn't change anything, then at least we did due diligence, and if nothing else, our attorneys can use that to defend us in court. It's your turn.
Congratulations, Jeff. That's it.
And thanks, Kim. And I guess I'll just, Parker and I were talking about this the other day, and maybe this will make a headline, but I might be the first judge from the city of Destin, or designated to be a judge, and so I'm kind of proud of that. And I'd like to thank everyone out there who supported me during this. Thank you.
One question, Mr. Burns. Does that mean I can take your yard sign down?
It does. In fact, I think you have to after this Friday. So.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any further things that they'd like to share or ask or anything? Anybody from the audience would like to share?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I was at the same meeting Monday with Mayor Jarvis, and I didn't understand it the way he did. I saw that meeting as a front for the developers to try to form a coalition to sue the city. And they were told right up front by the attorneys that that wouldn't happen because every Byrd Harris Act had to stand on its own 2 feet. They all had to be individual. And I don't think they like what they heard. Now, there were not over 10 realtors, and probably 6 or 7. Most everybody in the room was developers or their attorneys. So it was orchestrated by Ms. Lyons, and I don't think it was really put together right. I think it was kind of deceptive to be held in Walton County, and the invitations did not go out. I don't believe, did any of you guys get an invitation? Did you get it the day of the meeting? So I'm just letting you know what the meeting was all about for the record. Thank you.
Mayor and Councilors, I'm Guy Tadlock, 502 Noriego. And congratulations, Mr. Burns. You're looking very judicial. And can a judge drive a pickup truck?
It's kind of hiding in plain sight if you do that, I think.
I have a question. The mayor mentioned Noriego Point. I call it Noriego Park, but it's really coming together nicely. I'm sure all of you have seen it. I was actually on the Blue Ribbon Committee that worked on that several years ago, and there was, as we got through the final design, there was a question that came up, and the question was primarily revolved around rules and regulations on where boats could moor and dock and things like that. And I think the Blue Ribbon Committee decided that that was really a decision for the recreational department. But the question that I've got, and perhaps it's already been taken care of, I think the contractor, based on what I understand, will be leaving shortly, maybe within a couple of weeks, and the last thing that he does is he puts up some barricades and some signage that directs the public to what areas they can have access for over the summer months. But one of the concerns that came up in the Blue Ribbon Committee was boats inside the embayments. You know, if you recall, there's 4 of them, and they really look nice. They're specially designed to try to minimize the amount of erosion that occurs because of storms, but boats in the embayments can really mess things up. I mean, there could be safety hazards, and then if they're large vessels or things like that, they could cause those embayments to erode a lot quicker. So my question is, are there any plans, and perhaps what are they, for kind of directing the public use for the embayments?
Would you like me to answer that, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, excuse me, now that they're finished with laying the sand and they're going to be doing the plantings on the dune, and then that'll be secured with fencing and signage, DEP will be coming back with another one of those public meetings like we had here and then over at the gymnasium at the community center. And it's going to be talking about the recreational components of Phase 2. I know that staff, our suggestion would be to rope off the interior of the T-groin areas with buoys and have signage that leaves it just as recreational swimming and prohibiting any motorized water vessels. Now, that's just staff suggestion, though, so it's really, you know, at the public meeting, all of those things will be discussed, and DEP will be able to take that information as part of the final design, because it's still their project.
Okay, but it's my understanding that that meeting will not be held probably into next fall. And I'm kind of concerned about June, July, and August.
Yeah, we're pushing to get them here sooner. That's pretty much all I can tell you, is that we heard the fall, but we're pushing, we want it sooner.
And that's great. I really think that, you know, we've got a wonderful asset and something that we're all proud of and really need to take care of, and I'd hate to see us mess it up this summer because we don't have rules in place.
Hold on, Mr. Tadlock.
Mr. Tadlock, I wanted to let you know that I have talked with David Campbell, and we had also on the harbor side, from the rocks to where we already have signage, to hopefully restrict that, because now that we got a little bit wider area for the boats to go in and out, letting people dock in that same area like they were, so they'd be restricted if the council, when we do that, we're going to try to restrict it back to where it's already got a sign on the harbor side, and then we'll work with the state or whatever on the other side.
Okay, great.
And Mr. Tadlock, I've talked with the DEP in the state about this, and one of the things that's got to be balanced is one of the requirements for that funding and under that grant is public access. So we're going to have to address that when we start talking about roping them off and preventing people from accessing that portion, because that portion where those abayances at are a long ways from the walkovers and stuff like that. So that'll be something that we could talk about when they talk about the final part of the project. But I agree with you.
Well, thank you. And one of the things is I remember a couple of years back, actually it was when the Blue Ribbon Committee was working, we actually had at that time 2 embayments, and the other one had kind of washed away. And the second one ultimately washed away as well. And there were several reasons why, but that particular one also had a lot of boat docking that was going on. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Lee Moore, representing Howard Group. A couple of quick points about the meeting agenda configuration. I would agree with Mr. Morgan. I've been going to these meetings for 4.5 years solid, and this is a generalization, but it's pretty much the vast majority of the time. I would say it's not the public that extends the length of the meetings. So making a lot of adjustments to public input and the way that's structured, I don't think is going to address the problem, if it is a problem. And I would also suggest that typically, and this is not a criticism of the way it's been done now, but typically the agendas are published on Fridays. And I don't know when you all get the information, but that is incredibly difficult when the meeting is on a Monday night. I think if the agendas could be published like a week before or sometime earlier than Friday, significantly earlier, that might help, because it would allow time for more exchange and whatever to happen before the meeting. And I'm also not saying that staff should work harder to get the agenda ready earlier. I'm saying you have a cutoff, and if an agenda item is not ready by then, you just put it to the next meeting. And so just a couple of suggestions from a layperson out here in the community. And then on the Crab Island issue, I just wanted to make a couple of quick points on that. This has been discussed for years, and unanimously, for the most part, people have felt like there were major problems there. I think you can read the resolution that was on board tonight and see a lot of reasons for that resolution as it was originally worded to be passed. We've always supported it, the premises in that resolution. I will say that I did attend the workshop where there were tons of government agencies represented. And when you say it's about optics, it is a lot about optics. Optics are critically important, but it's also a lot about principle. And when the subject that area is a national park, it is part of a national seashore, came up, every person just about representing an agency around that table started nodding their heads. And when the point was made that it is highly, highly unusual to have open commercial vending at on public property, that's highly unusual. If there is vending allowed, it's typically incredibly limited and there's a very structured way in which the limited vending that can occur there is approved. So I think, some state legislators have made some decisions that gave some power to the county, and the county is asking for input from the city. So while I know it's very difficult to do, this stuff's been talked about forever, and suddenly there's an association formed after years and years of this stuff being talked about publicly. I think self-regulation can work, but in this case, I will tell you from the optics perspective, there is nothing that's going to make that look better out there. And also from the principal perspective, it's a public park. The city of Destin doesn't allow commercial activity in its public parks. And so I think that's the bigger issue here. Typically, when you got a brick and mortar business like those are, you're either paying rent for the property you're operating from, or you own it and you've paid for it or are paying for it. So this is a whole lot different than paying sales tax and getting a business license if that's what they're doing. So just want to make those points, and I appreciate your time.
Lee, I got a question for you, and I really appreciate all your comments. Would you rather have said this at the beginning of the meeting, your comments about Crab Island and stuff like that, versus having to wait this time, or did it matter to you?
I actually didn't think I would need to make them, so I chose not to make them then. But no, and that's the other thing I would reiterate. I agree completely that not having a comment section at the end, because the same way that a lot of people can't or don't want to stay till the end of the meeting, some people, because of their schedule, can't make the very beginning of a meeting. So I don't see why you wouldn't just have both. It's like a catch-all, and you let everybody. And like was raised earlier, a lot of times things happen in a meeting that people want to comment on at the end that they may not have planned to.
How about, would you think it'd be more appropriate then that when we're having these agenda items on or off the thing, that we just provide more public input, like you weighing in on the Crab Island issue after we had the discussion and doing it then versus having to make these comments at the end in the interest of...
Yeah, I think I brought that up before. It's a lot easier when you can comment during when the item's being presented. But I still like to have it at the end for a catch-all.
That was a lot of the intent of some of the changes, because what happens is when you run an efficient meeting like that, it allows the chairman the opportunity, if somebody raises their hand during our discussion, that I can go ahead and recognize you because of the time
I like
frame.
both, honestly. I don't see the harm in having a catch-all at the end.
All right, thank you for your input.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. John Stevens, 4025 Indian Trail. I guess bringing up a point about the public comments, I guess me staying at the very end kind of realized that my application wasn't turned in. So I think the public comments need to be at the end. Yeah, honestly, I actually have a verification email that my application was turned in, so I'm not sure if there's an issue with the online application or not, but it has been turned in, so as of March 12th. So that's all I got.
Yeah, thanks, John, appreciate it.
Mayor, may I answer that? His application was turned in on the first meeting in April when you were appointing individuals, and he was not appointed. This time I had forgotten that application still exists, so now I remember that it was not presented to Mr. Marler.
All right. You know what happens when you volunteer around here? You're going to be on that committee. All right. Any other public comments? If seeing none, I call this meeting adjourned.